You should prepare human. We're having puppies. Adra, an alien Volpini, dropped the shocking news. The cramped cockpit of the scout ship buzzed with tension as Todd Mallister shifted in his co-pilot seat. His gaze kept drifting toward his unusual companion, a striking alien female from a species he had only recently encountered. The Volpini were famous for their sharp senses and unmatched tracking skills, making them invaluable for reconnaissance missions. Adra, as she called herself, sat perfectly still in the pilot's chair. Her large, fox-like ears twitched at every tiny sound. Her flowing red hair cascaded down her back like liquid fire, and her piercing amber eyes seemed to absorb every detail around them. The way her tail occasionally swished against the seat was oddly mesmerizing. "You're staring again, human," she said without turning her head, a smirk tugging at her lips. "I know we're fascinating to your kind, but try to maintain some professionalism." Todd cleared his throat, embarrassed at being caught. "Sorry, it's just, I've never worked with a Volpini before. The briefing didn't really prepare me for..." "For what?" She finally turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. "A predator species that doesn't fit your expectations of savage warriors?" "Actually, yes," he admitted with a sheepish grin. "Most non-human species I've encountered in similar roles tend to be, well, more physically intimidating." Adra's laughter was melodic, though there was a sharpness to it. "We Volpini prefer to use our minds over brute force. But don't mistake that for weakness. Human. We can defend ourselves when necessary." A sudden ping from the ship's sensors drew their attention. Adra's ears perked up as she analyzed the readings. "Unusual energy signatures from the third moon," she reported, her tone all business. "Consistent with the smuggler activity we're tracking." Todd leaned forward, scanning the data. These readings match what intelligence provided. "Looks like this tip might actually pay off." "Indeed." Adra's fingers danced across the controls, adjusting their flight path. "We'll need to land in that valley to avoid detection. The magnetic interference from the local minerals should help mask our presence." As they descended, Todd couldn't help but admire her skill. The Volpini might not be warriors, but their reputation for precision was clearly well-earned. The landing was flawless, the ship touching down so gently that Todd barely felt it. Adra powered down the engines and gathered her survey equipment. "We'll need to proceed on foot," she said, checking her environmental scanner. "The target facility is approximately 3 kilometers northeast, but this terrain will slow us down." Todd nodded, double-checking his gear: standard-issue plasma pistol, emergency beacon, and basic survival kit. He noticed Adra carried no visible weapons, though her equipment seemed far more advanced than his. As they stepped out, the alien landscape stretched before them, a vast expanse of purple-tinted rock formations and strange, twisting vegetation that faintly glowed under the dim light of the system's distant sun. "Stay close," Adra advised as they began their trek. "This world's ecosystem is largely unexplored. There could be predators we haven't documented yet." "Worried about my safety?" Todd teased, trying to lighten the mood. Her amber eyes flashed with something unreadable. "Just being practical, human. I'd rather not explain to command how I lost my partner on our first mission." They moved carefully through the alien terrain, Adra's sharp senses scanning for danger. Todd found himself increasingly impressed by her ability to detect hazards before they became threats. Poisonous plants, unstable ground, even local wildlife that might betray their position. As the hours passed, Todd began to appreciate why the Volpini were so valued for this kind of work. Where a more militant species might have blasted their way through obstacles, Adra's methodical approach kept them hidden and safe. "You're surprisingly quiet for a human," she remarked during a brief rest. "Most of your kind can't stop talking about themselves." Todd shrugged. "Maybe I'm just a good listener. Besides, you're far more interesting than anything I could talk about." A faint blush colored her cheeks beneath her fine fur, though her expression remained composed. "Flattery will get you nowhere, human. Though, I must admit, you're not quite what I expected either." "Oh, and what did you expect?" "The typical human male bravado, all muscles and ego, constantly trying to prove something." She studied him with those piercing amber eyes. "You're different." Before Todd could respond, her ears twitched forward, and she held up a hand for silence. In an instant, she was completely still, every sense locked onto something beyond her perception. "Multiple contacts," she whispered. "Heavy vehicles, about half a kilometer ahead. We're closer to their facility than I thought." Todd pulled out his tactical scanner, but it registered nothing. "I don't pick up." "Trust my ears over your technology," she cut in softly. "We need cover. Now." They quickly ducked into a narrow crevice between two towering rock formations. The space was tight, forcing them close together. Todd could feel her warmth, the subtle, exotic scent of her fur. Her tail brushed against his leg, and he tried very hard to focus on potential danger rather than their sudden proximity. Minutes later, he finally heard what she had detected: the low rumble of grav vehicles moving through the valley. Through the narrow opening of their hiding spot, they watched a convoy of unmarked transports pass by, heading toward what appeared to be a concealed entrance in the mountainside. "Definitely our smugglers," Adra murmured, her breath warm against his ear. "That facility must be larger than intelligence suspected. We should get closer. Try to gather more detailed readings," Todd suggested. She nodded but made no immediate move. Instead, her eyes met his, the intensity in them unlike anything he had seen before. "Todd," she said softly, using his first name for the first time, "if this goes badly—" "It won't," he assured her. "We make a good team." A small smile played at her lips. "Yes, more than you realize." They waited until the convoy had completely passed before carefully emerging from their hiding spot. As they moved toward the facility, Todd couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. The way Adra moved now seemed more deliberate, more aware of his presence. "There," she pointed to a ridge overlooking the facility's entrance. "We can set up surveillance there without being detected. The rock composition should mask our biosignatures." As they climbed, Todd found himself watching her movements, the grace with which she navigated the difficult terrain, the quiet strength in her form. She was beautiful in a way that transcended species. "What am I thinking?" He scolded himself. "This is a mission, not a romantic opportunity." Besides, interspecies relationships were complicated. Little did he know just how complicated things were about to become. The storm came without warning. One moment they were monitoring the smuggler facility. The next, their instruments registered massive electromagnetic disturbances in the atmosphere. Adra's ears flattened against her head before the instruments could confirm it. "We need shelter. Now," she said urgently, already packing her gear. "These storms can last for days, and they're lethal in the open." Todd quickly followed, trusting her instincts. "The ship's too far. Any alternatives?" "There's a network of caves in the cliffside below us. If we hurry—" A brilliant flash of purple lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening crack. Adra winced, her sensitive ears suffering from the intensity. Without thinking, Todd grabbed her hand, and they scrambled down the ridge. The charged alien air made their hair stand on end. Adra's tail puffed out impressively, though she was too focused on survival to care. They barely made it inside the cave as the first waves of electromagnetic energy washed over the landscape. Inside, the mineral-rich walls provided some protection. "Well," Todd panted, catching his breath, "at least we're dry." Adra shot him a look that suggested human humor still eluded her. "We're alive," she corrected. "That's what matters." The storm had only just begun. Todd tightened his arms around Adra, his breath steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. The weight of their reality settled deeper with each passing second. This was real. Their connection had created something new, something unprecedented. The scientific implications alone were staggering, but none of that mattered compared to the way Adra trembled against him. "They're really there," she whispered, pressing her palm against her abdomen. "Our pups." Todd exhaled, brushing a hand over her ears, soothing her. "Yeah," he murmured, "and I swear, no matter what happens next, we're in this together." She tilted her head to look up at him, those amber eyes glowing softly in the dim corridor light. "You are certain?" "This is not an obligation, Todd. My people mate for life. but I will not bind you to something you do not truly want. He cupped her face, his thumb tracing the fine fur along her cheek. I want this, he said firmly. I want you, and I want them. We'll figure out the rest together. A soft purr rumbled from Adra's throat, and she leaned into his touch, her tail curling possessively around his wrist. For a moment, there was nothing but warmth between them, the silent promise of a future neither had imagined but neither wanted to turn away from. The moment was broken by the distant chime of an alert over the station's intercom. Adra exhaled and straightened, her ears swiveling toward the sound. We should get back to our quarters before anyone starts asking questions. Todd nodded. Agreed. Let's keep this quiet until we decide how to handle it. They moved in sync, walking the familiar halls of the station with practiced ease. But as they neared their quarters, Todd caught a glimpse of something that made his stomach tighten. Commander TH was standing just ahead, his antennae twitching as he watched them approach. Specialist Adra. Agent McAllister, the Andorian commander greeted, his tone neutral but his gaze piercing. A word, if you please. Adra stiffened slightly beside Todd, but she nodded. Of course, sir. TH gestured for them to follow him into a small debriefing room off the main corridor. The moment the door slid shut behind them, the commander turned to face them fully, arms crossed. Dr. Prell has not officially reported anything, he began, his antennae dipping slightly. But I've been in command long enough to know when something significant has occurred. Todd exchanged a glance with Adra, then squared his shoulders. Sir, we plan to come to you ourselves, he admitted. We just needed time to process the situation first. Tate studied them for a long moment before speaking. I trust both of you implicitly. You are among my best operatives. But if there is something affecting your ability to serve, I need to know. Adra's tail flicked, a sign of both nerves and resolve. It does not affect my ability to serve, sir, but it does affect my future. TH's gaze flicked between them. His antennae twitched again, and then he sighed. Very well. You have 3 days. After that, I expect full disclosure. Do I make myself clear? Todd nodded. Yes, sir. TH studied them a moment longer, then gave a curt nod and stepped aside, allowing them to leave. As soon as they were out of earshot, Todd exhaled heavily. That was close. Adra managed a small smirk. You do realize he already knows, don't you? Yeah, Todd muttered. But at least he's letting us handle it on our terms. She reached for his hand, her fingers tangling with his as they walked. Then we make the most of these 3 days, because after that, everything changes. Todd squeezed her hand, looking into the eyes of the woman who had turned his world upside down. Then let's make sure we're ready. Together, they stepped into the unknown, not just as partners, but as something more.